Now let's begin with terrorism. The Nigerian military says the list of the 19 wanted terrorists with bounties on them will be updated when necessary. The Director of Defense Media Operations, Major General Musa Damadami, disclosed this in Abuja while assuring citizens that despite involving security challenges, efforts are ongoing to tackle them. TVC News Defense correspondent Sifion Essien reports.
It's another media engagement with the defense media operations. The last 2 weeks have been eventful across the theaters of operations. At least 2 of the wanted 19 terrorists with a bounty on them have been killed. Many more whose names were not on the list died during air strikes by the Nigerian Air Force.
Not everybody that is wanted on that list is going to be continuously be reviewed based on information we're getting from the intelligence community. Those lists is going to be reviewed.
But the security situation is constantly evolving and more threats are emerging in the run-up to the elections in 2023.
We will continue to do our work. We are not sleeping and we are not relenting on our efforts. We will continue to do our work, irrespective of whatever is happening in the country.
What remains to be seen is how the security forces will live up to their billings. Sifion Essien, TVC News, Abuja.
Right, joining me now for more discussion on this issue is a retired Assistant Director at the Department of State Services, Dennis Makri. Thank you for joining us as always.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
Right. Some people say 5 million naira bounty is too small to convince people to disclose information about dangerous terrorists. Do you agree?
I agree. I agree that 5 million naira is too small because you see the money, the bounty should be very attractive so that people will be eager to do it. Even people who are very close to these terrorists will be thinking about, they will count on what the money can do for them. But 5 million naira, I don't think is a very attractive amount.
All right. Let me also have your view on the issue of, or the option of whistleblowing. And you will agree with me that people take the option of whistleblowing lightly because they are not sure their security is guaranteed. How can security agencies earn the confidence of the public on this matter?
Thank you. When a security agency comes up with a wanted list, I think what they are trying to do is to seek the help of the public, in tracking down these particular terrorists. And in Nigeria, of course, we have had wanted lists. In fact, the Inspector General has put out one some years ago about wanted criminals. But terrorists wanted list is a different one, which of course started in the United States when 9/11 happened in New York. So the terrorist list is very, more engaging. But at the same time, I think what has been put out to the public, I don't think they think about it very well because we don't have pictures of these people. We don't even have their birthdays so that if they are passing through a border, the immigration people can easily, match them. 2 people can be answering the same name, and then, of course, you match them by their birthdays. Or if their pictures are there, you can at least confirm that this is the right person. But you list names for us, and the people can just be passing through by anybody, and nobody will know who they are.
All right, Mr. Makri, finally, before I let you go, what's your assessment of the armed forces and the ongoing war on terror?
Well, I think they are doing their best. We have seen that the frequency of attacks have really gone down. They have taken the fight to their doorsteps. the doorsteps of the terrorists. Many of them are on the run. And then, of course, a lot of people are surrendering. And this is because of the synergy that we'll be talking about. Synergy between the armed forces, and then, of course, the DSS, the intelligence community, and the police. So everybody working together. I think if we've been doing this some years back, I think this whole thing would have been history. But I'm happy. I think I'm very, very happy that they are taking on the terrorists head on, and the banditry, you know, and then, of course, devoid of any political affiliations. They should just go ahead and do what they have to do.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Dennis Amakwe, Assistant Director or retired Assistant Director at the Department of State Services, for your contribution.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now we're going to take a short break and Newsweek continues in a moment. Stay with us. You're welcome back, and it's still Newsweek, where we discuss the biggest stories that made the headlines in the week. Now, away from terrorism, the federal government has confirmed that about 133 million Nigerians are poor and living in poverty. The worrying figure is contained in the 2022 Multidimensional Poverty Index survey released by the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, in Abuja. The NBS says the figure represents 63% of the country's population, and what that means is that only 37% of Nigerians are doing well. We have details in this report.
The launch of the country's Multidimensional Poverty Index. The report shows 133 million people, representing 63% of Nigeria's population, are multidimensionally poor. 86 million people, representing 65%, live in the north, while nearly 47 million, representing 35%, are in the south. The multidimensionally poor levels vary across states, with Ondo having the lowest rate of 27%, while the highest is Sokoto at 91%.
The Multidimensional Poverty Index survey is arguably one of the largest surveys to be undertaken by NBS, with the largest sample size of 56,610 households that we selected across 109 senatorial districts in 36 states and federal capital of the Federation.
The president, who is represented by the chief of staff, says the data gives an in-depth insight into the state of poverty in the country and will definitely help in shaping policies aimed at poverty alleviation.
Nigeria is, of course, as we know, a large and diverse country. Using the disaggregation to show the vast range on the level of poverty, we can see the precise needs of each state and senatorial district, which will allow policymakers at that level to take appropriate action.
All right, joining me now for more discussion on this is a political analyst, Olufemi Lawson. Welcome.
Good evening. Yeah.
All right, this report means that 63% of the nation's population lives in poverty. How scary is this, Olufemi?
Well, first and foremost, I think it is commendable that this isn't coming from maybe non-governmental organizations, civil society, or opposition, political organizations, where it would have been easily, dispelled by individuals and agencies of government. This is coming from NBS, a government institution in charge of our national statistics. And it should be frightening. Frightening because the NBS must have been extremely moderate in arriving at that report. It must have been extremely considerate in arriving at that report, and that the NBS could agree that about 63% of Nigerians are currently living in multidimensional poverty should really worry us as Nigerians. Meaning that if this survey would be independently conducted by credible auditing firms, civil society, non-government organizations, or reputable international institutions, you will not be surprised that not less than 70% of our population are today living in extreme poverty. But I must comment that the current administration is courageous enough to have allowed this result to be released, despite such revelation coming from a government-driven agency. And I think we should be worried as Nigerians, and the government, if not worried, should see this as a major challenge, not only to the not only about the success of the government in the last 7 years, but also, about taking responsibility for the failure of the government to implement the promise of the current administration of President Buhari, which made commitment to lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. Today, if out of 200 million, over 1.3 million are living in poverty, I think it's a terrible score for the administration, and the administration should be worried.
Speaking of the current administration, what do you think they can do to address this issue of multi-dimensional poverty before they leave office?
I think with the level of sincerity that the administration had displayed in coming out to tell Nigerians that, come, over 1.3 million of our 200 million population are living in multi-dimensional poverty, that even of the remaining 7 million or thereabout, you must understand that not because they are really living above poverty or are, of course, in the class of people who have escaped the poverty ladder, but that within this 67 million, you still find the so-called middle class, which practically does not really exist. People who could really eat twice, feed twice daily, and some other who could really afford some basic necessities, as Nigerians. But I think because the government have been sincere enough to expose this fact to Nigerians, I think the less than 7 months that the administration has to pilot the affairs of this country should be focused on relieving Nigerians from this burden of poverty that over 1.3 million of our population have been driven into. There is a need for radical redirection of our economic policies. There's a need for radical intervention in our national security because the insecurity in the country has driven a lot of people out of their jobs, has driven a lot of farmers out of the farms, has driven a lot of people out of their economic activities. And these are issues that I think the next 7 months can be used to address, to at least, if not take the 200 million out of population, take the 100 million as promised by President Buhari out of poverty in Nigeria.
All right, Mr. Olufemi, a key recommendation in this report is a call on the government to deal with this child poverty as the nation's top priority. What other dimensions to poverty do you think need this urgent intervention?
No, I will keep commending one of the very few sincere interventions that have been made by this government. This is one of the very few sincere, revelations that has been made by this government about itself. And that is why we cannot just, take this report in the aspect of what negative it has exposed. On one hand, we must commend the fact that the government is courageous enough to expose these realities. But fundamentally, the more we reduce access to education for our young population, the more we reduce the tendency for our young population to be gainfully employed, then the more we can continue to increase this rate of poverty. Our young population's education is being taken away from them. Poverty begins to increase because they are no longer educated, they are not employable, the jobs are not there. So we must focus on those factors
that must be addressed to take our young people out of the streets, to get our young people working, to get the children back to school, and automatically we'll be reducing this poverty index.
Right, Mr. Lufemi Lawson, thank you so much for your contribution so far. But right now, let's go to our last topic for tonight. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, says it will address issues raised concerning voter register ahead of the 2023 elections. INEC had this month made the entire register public on its website for the first time in the country's electoral history. However, many Nigerians identified numerous cases of underage voters and double registration in the document. Meanwhile, INEC Commissioner in charge of Information and Voter Education, Festus Okoye, said it is committed to cleaning up the register and punish those found guilty of tampering with its integrity. All right, I still have Lufemi in the studio with me. The idea of this underage voters or anything you want to call it, keep persisting. Why do you think this thing is still rampant and mostly in the north?
Well, I thank you for the last line of your question. I've had the intention of making this response. I haven't spent the last 3 days out of the 7 days of the last 1 week to actually engage myself with going through the INEC portal and this registration as displayed by INEC. And it is fair to say at this point that this is not limited to the north. You will be surprised that even in states as close as Ogun and Oyo, from involvement in the assessment and verification, and we must give credit to those who champion the cause for our electoral. This is not coming as a goodwill from INEC. It is statutorily mandated because of the reviewed electoral act that INEC must display this so that people can actually verify the authenticity of these registrations. The truth is that this cut across every regions of the country. I saw several cases of minors registered as voters in Edo, in Anambra, even in Oyo State. You will be surprised. So it tells you that it is not, because the social media tend to have made it alarming as a northern Nigerian issue. But the truth is that be it 10 in the north and 2 in Lagos, they are all illegal and asked to. So the fact that the law has now made it mandatory for INEC to do this is one thing that we should appreciate as Nigerians. And most importantly, as Nigerians, we must take advantage of the window that has been opened to us by the new Electoral Act to expose these cases. It's an alarming issue. It is a very worrisome issue that in some political words, you find these underage voters numbering in hundreds, who have been registered to vote in 2023. And if this window had not been opened, you'd have had a situation whereby people just turn in, tons of votes, and these are coming from people who are not naturally eligible to vote. So I want to restate that this is not peculiar to the north. It happened virtually in all the states of the Federation, and that Nigerians must begin to look even inward to their own various constituencies and look at how much of these underage voters and these people who are not even existent, some funny, very funny names, some funny pictures of people who I know are not even Nigerians, appeared on the new voters list. And INEC must go beyond the opportunities that the law has given to us as Nigerians to see this, to ensuring that those who encourage this, those officials who encourage the registration of these unqualified to be voters are not only exposed, but are also punished. And that is where we can prevent a future occurrence of this.
All right, you just commended the INEC for making the register public. And do you...
I commended the law. It was not a free gift for INEC. It was a product of the agitation of political groups, civil societies, who championed the cause for the electoral reform.
Yeah, of course, they also say it's a sign of transparency on their part. Do you agree? Do you think this is...
No, it is not about the wish of INEC to be transparent. INEC under Professor Mahmoud Yakub, has done tremendously well in improving on our electoral fortune. When you look at the series of innovations that INEC has introduced in the last 5 years or thereabout. But the truth is that Nigerians have played a lot of roles. I cannot but use this opportunity to commend roles played by the civil society, particularly one of my late friends, Ariyo, Aristotle, who was one of those who championed the cause of this reform for our elections. So it is not a free will, it is not a gift given to Nigerians by INEC. This is as a result of the demand of Nigerians for credible elections. And we are not yet there. There will always be need for continued review of our electoral process. But this one is a major one for us, that we could really streamline the number of those, the quality of those who are eligible to participate in our elections.
Right, we're almost out of time, but I just want to find out from you quickly. It's just about 96 days to general election. How can you rate the INEC's preparation?
INEC has, in the last 1 month, been involved in series of engagement, media, civil society, security agencies have been trained, retrained, they have been consulted. But I think INEC now has to do more in engaging the political parties, especially when you look at the tendency for violence and unnecessary, escalation of, the political situation from political parties, not necessarily even from the major political parties. The way we are going now, there is a tendency from these smaller political parties to trigger, tension within the system. So INEC, as much as it is doing to engage the security agencies, the partner organizations, the media, must also do a lot in engaging these political parties, especially the 18 political parties that are participating in the presidential election, to ensure that this election is made purely a civil process and not a war.
All right, Mr. Olufemi Lawson, thank you as always for coming on the show and your contribution. And that's our show for today. Join us next week for a fresh episode of the program. Remember, you can follow the conversation on our social media platforms at TVC News NG or on our website at tvcnews.tv. I am Jacinta Obiugo. Until next week, it's goodbye.